and welcome back to another Half Pint session. Today, I'm going to be interviewing a man who has cost me about, 12 to 13 hours of my life because a couple of months ago, I was recommended a video on YouTube with Landon Lofton. Landon, who's been on the show a couple of times, most recently to talk about Kenneth Grahame. And this was Landon talking to somebody that wasn't me. So I went and had a listen, and that was the first episode of The Plunge, which I had ever watched. And I subscribed on my podcast and looked at their back catalogue, only to discover that, they do a lot of the things that we like to do as well. So I had to have the host on. So Derek Holser, welcome to Pints with Jack.
Yeah, great to be here with you, David. And I've got my half pint, so cheers.
Cheers. Well, would you mind just introducing yourself to our viewers? So for people who haven't been listening to you constantly on high speed for every evening for the last couple of weeks, who are you?
Yeah, name's Derek Holser, and I am an author, an educator, and an attorney. And at different points in my life, those have been in different orders, depending upon what was occupying most of my time. I practiced law for nearly 20 years and assisted small businesses, corporations, and nonprofit organizations, in particular churches and Christian ministries, with navigating the IRS and various things that they had to do to be compliant to maintain their nonprofit status. I have always been drawn to education, so I am a school teacher, then a college professor. I've taught every level from second grade to law school over the years. Most recently,
and who has the biggest tantrums, law students or toddlers?
Boy, the second grade was the most challenging job to this date I still have ever had, but also incredibly fulfilling and rewarding as I navigated how best to manage 37-year-olds. So I learned a lot in that year, and it was just 1 year.
Yeah, mainly that I don't want to teach that grade ever again.
Yes. And I'm married 25 years in July of 2025, so easy to keep track of. We were married in 2000, and we have 3 children now, mostly grown, 22, 20, and 18. And we live on Bainbridge Island, Washington, outside of Seattle, have been here for 5 years, after spending most of the last 2 decades in Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Where you got sick of the sun. You didn't want to see that again for 9 months out of the year.
No, I thought, I want a canopy that is oppressing me and very close to my head at all times.
Yes. Whenever I tell, because I spent 2 years in Seattle, and I describe it, when you're annoying your brother or sister in the car by putting your hand just in front of their face, not actually touching it. Yeah. That's what it feels like being in Seattle for 9 months out of the year. Spring and summer are gorgeous, at least the latter part of spring and the first part of summer.
Yes.
But oh my goodness, the rest of the time, it's just like, I remember there was... It felt like I was useless in the silver chair. It's like, I remember there being something up there, but it's blurry. I forget.
I love your analogy to the kid in the car. That's so good. I'm not touching him.
Can't get mad.
Right. I grew up in Kentucky, so that explains the Michael Jordan poster over my shoulder. I've been a basketball player and fan my whole life. Just returned actually from a week at Duke, where they have a grown-up boys basketball sleepover camp, and a bunch of old guys like me that still want to play go out and try not to get injured playing basketball. I guess the last little bit about me, why I started the podcast. As I mentioned, I've been an adjunct professor. I actually ran a small college for 6 years, right before COVID. And I just love the interaction of deep conversations. I think that's the most and best way for students to be engaged. And though I'm not in the classroom currently, I thought, what's a way to pursue the curiosities I have? And maybe there are others out there who would like to participate in these conversations as well as listen to them, but not do a one-off podcast, as is very typical. Nothing wrong with it. There's just plenty of that content. My model is a thematic serial format. As you explained, you lost 12 hours of your life because we do prolonged conversations with multiple guests on a particular topic. And so we are currently in a series entitled George MacDonald for Every Generation. And the long-term goal is to put together a decade of content connected at the intersection of theology, philosophy, and culture. So upcoming, it'll diverge from sort of Inklings related topics. And we're going to have a conversation with Christian and secular psychologists and spiritual directors on formation, identity, and sexuality. And then in the fall, we're going to have something really fun for the holidays, a series entitled Tolkien's Greatest Characters, where each week a new guest will come and tell why Frodo's the best, or Gandalf, or Arwen, or whomever. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
I love that. And then have one mega episode at the end, a battle royale, like a balloon debate. And you throw somebody out every few minutes.
Yes.
Well, I first discovered your stuff, as I mentioned, regarding Owen Barfield. How did that happen? I have so many questions, because people who discover Barfield, there's usually only a few routes. It's usually because they've heard him referenced enough with Lewis, and they've read some of the other Inklings, and they're like, all right, let's give this a go. Or really from the absolute other end, Rudolf Steiner, don't understand him, who can translate him a bit for me, and then they come to Barfield.
Yes.
How did you discover him?
Yeah, and our mutual friend now, Max Leaf, it took the Steiner route, but you're right.
Still breaks my brain, that.
Very oblique. Yeah, so I've always been the type of person who's curious about the people behind the big name. Mm-hmm. Something about me is just drawn to those that are more hidden away. And I guess I don't know what it is in me, but if somebody's become hyper prominent, I'm like, oh, we've already covered it. What more? What are the influences that are influencing the influencer? Mm-hmm. I guess. And so Lewis, I grew up in a Christian home in an American evangelical Baptist community. So I knew Lewis from the time I was little. Read Mere Christianity, The Problem of Pain, A Grief Observed, on and on, Screw Tape Letters. And I guess I'll say, David, I think I was curious about something more, and it wasn't Lewis's fault, but many in that culture were reductionistic and, very evangelical apologetics, but very formulaic in presenting the gospel. Mm-hmm. And it seemed truncated. It seemed lacking in majesty and grandeur and mystery and wonder. And so when I encountered George MacDonald, thanks to Mr. Lewis, of course, with this edition, when Lewis put together the anthology to try to promote MacDonald, who had become a bit obscure, I began to be opened up to that wider world. And so MacDonald's Unspoken Sermons, one thing led to another. And in long story short, the first guest, I believe he was the first, maybe he was the second, on that Barfield series was a guy named Mike DeFucia.
Mm-hmm. And he's been Michael, on the show as well.
Yeah. And Michael...
Glad to see his internet's better than when I interviewed him. God,
yes,
it's awful.
Yes, Dr. Bass. He loves those boats. He and I became good friends, very close friends. In fact, I would say we're, bosom buddies to this day. But in 2018, I was beginning to ask more of these questions. I had started a master's in theology just for my own sake. And he is an expert in Barfield. So that's my introduction to Barfield, was through Michael and conversations with him. And as I began to unpack what kind of series we would put on the podcast, I'm like, Owen Barfield, man, he's like interesting, different, quirky, a little out there. That's my kind of people.
I really liked the way that you opened it up in terms of who are influencing the influencers. Because my chief interest in Owen Barfield and Charles Williams is the fact that Lewis drank with them, talked with them, and you see some of their ideas appearing in his text. Mm-hmm. They've been tidied up a little bit, but they're there. And because Charles died early and Lewis died comparatively early, the question that always pops into my head is, what else did they have that's worth mining further.
Mm.
That if Lewis has managed to find gold in them hills, what else is still there that is worth some consideration? And both Williams and Barfield are somewhat eccentric characters. They definitely have a very unique take on the world. And so it's very easy for somebody that grew up in, historic Christianity to look at this like, this is strange, this is weird, I don't like this, and just write it off immediately. But with both of them, I found that the more time I've spent with them, I'm starting to get, pardon the pun, inklings of other things that are there that I think are worth some consideration. One of the things that I loved in your series, you had one guest on who spoke about another Barfield scholar who was a Catholic whose books ended up on the desks of popes, and he was basically kind of almost an interpreter or an illuminator of Barfield. And I literally stopped at that point, looked it up. It's like, all right, this is perfect, because I'm gonna start reading this guy, because I want somebody to hold my hand and try and do the project that I've kind of wanted more people to do, in terms of just like explain him in terms that I already understand, point out where there's similarity, point out where there's some difference, and what we could possibly learn from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was the episode with Nate Heil.
Yeah.
And Nate,
I've already scheduled him for next season. That was the other thing I did after I went and looked him up. It's like, you're coming on the show, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, fantastic insight. And I would say for Barfield, I think, David, at the core of what resonates with me is eternal hope. And that is what's compelling to me about MacDonald's work. That's what's compelling to me, again, about Barfield's. The idea of that final participation, when all shall be all in all in Christ, in the Father. And I guess it's certainly connected to the Inklings in general, sort of that longing, as Lewis said, for something that it's clear that we were made for another world, or I'm not exactly sure how he says that famous quote, but it's that longing in our hearts for that transcendence and purity, beauty, the essence of the Father's love just radiating in and through us. So
what did you yourself learn in that series? I'm curious.
I think I learned that, well, it's trite, but I learned that I know very little about the world. And despite all of the trappings of, higher education that I am both a student of and a professor in, how limited our ability to comprehend is truly, how finite this container makes our experience, and how reality for me must be far more layered, nuanced, and grander than whatever it is that I can sort of quantify. And Barfield talks a lot about that, as does Lewis. All the Inklings, as I perceive them, were very anti the scientism, the industrialization, that sort of reductionism that was the hallmark of the early 1900s, late 1800s, and that draw back to the Romantic era. I think Barfield's fiction is now something that I am going to tackle this year. So I've got a few of those on my list. The Silver Trumpet, certainly, as that was shared with me by Eugene Terrakin.
And its anniversary is coming up soon. And I think his grandson said that there should be a new edition coming out.
Yes, I believe so. And so Eager Spring, in one of our guests, Laura Van Dyke, shared about that.
Yeah, that was my first Barfield book.
Okay.
And I loved it and I hated it at the same time, because I started reading the story and it's just like, there's something, there's an echo. It's absolutely not Lewis, but there's something of just like, oh, this is good, engaging writing. I'm really enjoying this. And you reach the point in the book where the female protagonist discovers Steiner. And I flick, it's just like, oh, so this is like the next 13 pages. It's like, if you just want to talk about Steiner, just write that book. Don't just sort of crowbar it in.
Yeah,
I'm being a bit mean.
that's
But
okay.
but yeah, I definitely enjoyed Eager Spring, and particularly the way it ends broke my brain. I was like, wait, what? I don't understand. But yeah, the more of Barfield that I've read, again, for myself, for listening to your series, it put me in mind of Ted Lasso in one of the early episodes, where he says, "Don't be judgmental, be curious."
Yes.
It's the scene where he wins the darts game, and I think that is sort of my real position with regards to Barfield, and I am curious
Yes. And
because
go ahead.
you say some things that do resonate within me, and you definitely see some dangers of modernity which were absolutely proved right. Uh, but you're saying some very strange things, and some of them in strange ways. And I was
Hmm.
like, what am I missing?
Yeah, I think. Well, I'll say this as well, David. I've always been attracted to the heterodox.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, yeah, that's something in my own soul to process and forever be both vigilant, but also not restrictive with respect to the ideas I'll entertain,
Mm-hmm.
both theologically and philosophically, metaphysically. And you mentioned Barfield's, you know, shoehorning in Steiner. It was very apparent to me from those conversations that Barfield, in particular with his grandson, I mean, Barfield's work on the anthroposophical organization and movement was paramount. It was the essence of his beliefs, and he never wavered.
Mm-hmm.
And so that also opened me up to explore some Steiner. And yeah, he's way out there, no question. And yet, uh, I like it. I like weird and wacky. Like, I'm okay with it. I don't have to. He doesn't have to fit all the dogmas or the doctrines to be both interesting, compelling, and perhaps in many ways it's those characters that present maybe 100 wacky ideas, but two of them, you're like, that's the only way they would have been brought out. And
Mm.
there's something to them that I don't want to abandon. I actually want to investigate.
Yeah, that was the same for me with Williams. He's got lots of weirdy, occulty sort of stuff that is strange and gives me the feeling of the ick. But then I read him on substitution and coherence, and he sheds light on the Gospels and particularly the epistles of Paul that I hadn't really taken seriously.
Hmm.
Can we truly carry the burdens of another? Are we really as connected to one another as Scripture actually says? And we usually then reduce it to something. Oh, we're basically all members of a club. No, one body. That there are sinews
Yeah.
connecting each of us. Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about the person that you're examining at the moment, George MacDonald.
Oh,
I
please.
definitely got the vibes that you were a huge MacDonald fan as
Yeah.
I was listening
Yeah.
through.
Not very subtle there.
No, it's okay. And I was relatively late to him, as with most other people. I read Lewis. He pointed me to MacDonald. I read the anthology. I thought, that's pretty good. Then I read Fantasties and went, oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, bits of this I really like, but what does this represent? What's that? Oh, where's the allegory? I don't. And I try to sort of reduce it.
Hmm.
And after doing a few of MacDonald's stuff, I've now learned, you read it, you let it wash over you, you see what sediment is left at the end, and then you take a little look at that.
That's right.
But tell us a little bit more about your story with MacDonald, and also what you're hoping to cover in this series.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I came to MacDonald later, as you. So for me, it was first introduced. I would say I was maybe in my late 20s, um, and I read the. Uh, oh, man, I can't even remember. It was one of his fairy tales,
The
but
Golden
it did
Key
not. Pardon me. It wasn't the Golden Key. It might have been the Princess and
and the Goblin.
Curdie
Yeah.
or the
Mm-hmm.
Goblin. I've since read them, but uh, at that point in my life, I was not really that smitten with them or taken with it. And I was like, I mean, whatever. And it wasn't until my early 40s now that I came across his unspoken sermons, and obviously from this anthology.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an edition. I had him on the podcast, a guy named Jess Lederman, who
Mm-hmm.
has edited and put that together.
Yeah.
And that became part of my daily reading. And over time, as you say, the thing with reading MacDonald is it's not a one-time act. If you're going to read MacDonald, it needs to be consistent and constant over time. It doesn't have to be intense, but the ideas sort of simmer and work their way into you, as you say, and filter down. And but without hyperbole, Unspoken Sermons is as responsible as anything for my current state of spiritual formation, contentment, and faith.
Mm-hmm.
And it came about as a result of my own sort of crisis of faith with respect to what I would perceive as the hyper legalist formulaic method of constructing salvation that I was brought up in. And so God's love was bigger and more real in MacDonald's writing. God's heart was truer. And there was a question in one of his sermons, I believe it's Justice, in which he says, of all God's attributes, am I to believe only his mercy is finite? And that undid me, because the idea that people, no matter where they're at, no matter what they've done, are not beyond his mercy is really compelling. And so that got me into him. And since, read lots of stuff that he's written, gone to conferences about him where people who know everything about him, I just sit and listen.
Was
And
this
then
the recent one at the Wade?
No, this one was at Yale. It was in December.
Okay.
But yes, the one I missed the one at the Wade because I was at the Duke basketball camp. So he still hasn't eclipsed basketball in my life.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the current series, I thought it'd be fun to take what I don't want to do is become just another academic cul-de-sac.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have this be content that is accessible for both the studious and the curious. And so some of our series will have lay people on, which this series does, not just experts.
Mm-hmm.
And George MacDonald for Every Generation, the idea is to explore at all stages of the human experience, from childhood to aging and death, and the things that happen along those stages, to have different people talk about that season of life and how MacDonald's thoughts, stories, characters, and ideas can help make that a richer and more meaningful season.
And MacDonald has that range. He's very much like Lewis in that regards, because not only did he write in many different genres, and like Lewis, he also lived a lot of life. Some people don't live a lot of life, or they at least stay in one particular lane. He did. He had several different jobs, and whenever I read him, I'm reminded of some rabbi, I can't remember who, said something like, "The man who hasn't suffered, what could he possibly teach me?" And you only have to just scratch the surface of MacDonald's biography to discover that this was a man who suffered greatly.
Yes.
And yet he presents a vision of God that is so enticing. Now, I don't hold to his universalism, but he certainly has had an impact upon me in terms of my conception of God. The way that he speaks of him as a good, loving father, and how you even see that modeled in his relationship with his own father and with his own son.
Mm-hmm.
I had Dr. Jeffrey Johnson on the show, and she's told me, it's like, oh, you've got to read the letters that were exchanged between them. It's just so beautiful when you see a father loving his son this well and knowing him so thoroughly. So I know what you mean by just dripping a little bit of George MacDonald. He's like honey on pancakes. It's like you don't need a lot, but just every now and again with a few bites, it just adds a certain sweetness.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of, I think it was Chesterton that describes his work as sort of you're lost in a pasture, not knowing exactly why you're there, and then you trip over a gold nugget.
Yeah.
It really is that kind of lightning in a bottle. You'll read pages upon pages just for people who haven't attempted MacDonald, and many for good reason. I understand why he's difficult to get into, but you'll be reading a few pages and then there's like this sentence and it's like sings. Like, I mean, anyway, it's hard to describe in language. It's ineffable.
Well, how actually would you recommend people begin MacDonald?
Well, I would say if you are a more, what's the word? More literal slash studious type that likes word studies or nonfiction, then his Unspoken Sermons, and I can't recommend Jess Lederman's edition enough.
Yeah, my wife bought it for me for Christmas.
Yeah. So because he's packaged it in bite-sized ways to read daily. And in addition to that, I think in fact, my wife is currently reading Sir Gibby, which is one of the things that I'll say quickly about MacDonald is he presents Christ like how the parables present, the Good Samaritan, but fully with detail, rich detail, right? The gospel gives us 2 lines and we have no idea about that person's actual life. But Sir Gibby is a street urchin who embodies Christ everywhere he goes. And so over and over again, MacDonald's characters will be the most insignificant, unattractive, as the Bible says, he had no form or comeliness that we should desire him. And out of them springs forth this love of God and the life of Christ. So I think the fairy tales, if you like sort of, Cinderella and Alice in Wonderland and those types of things, then The Princess and Curdie, The Princess and the Goblin. For me, Lilith is my favorite, but it's also the most.
That's his Till We Have Faces. There's a lot going on in that book.
A lot. And as Ron Dart pointed out in one of my early episodes, he was interfacing with Dante in that novel explicitly and over a 5-year period, really developing that text. So, but Lilith, I will say, is out there. So don't get too mad at me if you're like, what is this about? Be forewarned.
It's funny. This morning we actually recorded an episode called "Till We Have Faces Primer" or Primer. The idea that if somebody hasn't read it yet and they're going to, this was the 3 of us. We got together. It's like, okay, what advice do we give? Like, when should this roughly be done? What's helpful if you've read before generally Anne of Lewis's works? And I feel like there could definitely be an episode like that for Lilith, because I stumbled into that one very early, and. Yeah, I had a little bit of a whiplash as I was going through. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, well, I've got several people knocking on me to do a series on that one. So, but you may already have one now that I'm subscribed to your channel. I'll just
no. I stayed well away from that. I wasn't ready for that. Yeah. But this has been wonderful. Where can people go to find out more about you? Read what you've written, listen to the episodes you've recorded.
Absolutely. Just type in Derek Holser. I'm the only Derek Holser still, HOLSER DEREK. And the Plunge is on YouTube. It's on Substack. And as far as a project that's independent of the Plunge, I will share with you because, like any good author, I'm going to promote.
Absolutely.
This is book 1 of the Light Glider Origin series, and it's called Bryce and the Lost Pearl, and it's available nationwide. It is book 1 of a 7-book series that I am unashamedly saying is an attempt to be Narnia for the digital age. And
bold.
Yes, very bold. I've never lacked for ambition. And it tells the story of 7 characters who are part of an existing video game that kids play right now all over the world called Light Gliders. And Bryce and the Lost Pearl is book 1. Book 2 is Tambika and the Shield of Wisdom, coming out this fall. And these are 7 teenagers who come from all over the world, but from different points in time, past, present, and future. and find themselves in a mysterious land called Glydion, like a Narnia. And they have to sort out issues there and find out more about themselves and become who God has meant them to be.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and taking the plunge into a half pint.
Thank you very much, David. Pleasure.
You're very welcome. And viewers, please join us again next time, and we'll continue going further up and further in. Cheers.